Hey everyone, welcome to Line by Line Coding Tutorials. My name is Jonathan and today we are covering the nested for loop in JavaScript. Let's go ahead and jump in and check it out. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into this nested for loop example. Before we start, I just wanted to say a lot of people tend to have a lot of difficulty understanding the nested for loop when they're first starting out. So don't worry if you're a little bit confused when we're going through this the first time. I'm going to break it down step by step into smaller little pieces so you guys can see exactly what's going on. So it'll become much clearer for you to understand by the end of this video. We're going to go ahead and start it right now. We have our outer for loop in orange and then inner for loop in gray. So I wanted to point out right here, see how we have I at the top, and we have Z in the inner for loop? Well, this is because if we had I as the variable down here in the inner for loop, it would be the same thing as one up here. So when we would go through this, if I would change up here and it would also change here, so it wouldn't be really, it wouldn't work at all. So you got to have a different variable name for your inner for loop compared to your outer for loop, just so you guys know. So you'll see and understand why we're going to do that in the later video when I show you the actual coding example. But for this, let's go ahead and just jump through this and go step by step and see how these nested for loops work. So just like a normal for loop, we're going to go ahead and start with the initialization. I is equal to 0. Then we're going to go ahead and do step 1, which is checking it. Is I less than or equal to 1? Yes, it is. It's less than because we're at 0. We're just going through it right now. So I is now 0. So these yellow blocks will just represent what I is in the console.logs. The orange blocks for the outer for loop, and then there will be gray blocks representing the inner for loop. So this will become a little bit clearer as we go through it. So let's go ahead and jump in. So we console.log I from this step 1 because we're checking it. So we're running the code from step 1 right here. So if I is less than or equal to 1, we're going to jump into these orange brackets right here. Notice we have it here. It's enclosed. This is enclosed in the orange brackets. We're going to run the console.log. So this is what that represents. So we're going to go ahead and do step 2, or I'm sorry, not step 2. We're going to be jumping into the inner for loop, and we're going to be initializing that one. So we run this, and now we're running this because it is inside of that outer for loop. As you can see here, these two brackets right here. This is tucked in inside. It's nested inside. So we're going to go ahead and start running this for loop. So we're initializing it. So z equals 0, and we're going to do step 1. Is z less than or equal to 2? Yep, it's 0. So we're going to console.log z, which will be down here, z equals 0. It's in between the brackets. We're running what's in between the gray brackets. Then we're going to go to step 2, z++, we're incrementing it. So now z is equal to 1. When we're, just want to point out, when you're writing this code and running it in like the browser, or when you're writing the code out, this won't actually change on your code editor. I'm just kind of making this a little visualization so you guys can understand a little better, but that would always remain 0, but z is actually changing behind the scenes. So we're going to go ahead and continue. So we're going to increment it. So now z equals 1. Okay. And we're going to go to step 1 again. Is z less than or equal to 2? Yes, it is. So we're going to go ahead and console.log it. So you can see down here, we got log of 1. Step 2 now, incrementing it. Z is now 2. And we're going to go ahead and do, is z less than or equal to 2? It's equal to 2. So we're going to console.log z again down here, the third block down there. And we're going to increment it again. And then we're going to go back, checking step 1 right here. We're still here. Is z less than or equal to 2? It is not. It's 3 now. So we're going to exit out of this gray part, and we're going to go back up here, and you'll notice how step 2 is started up here. So now we're incrementing up here, I++. So I is now equal to 1. Going again, step 1, I is less than or equal to 1. Yep, it is equal to 1 because it's 1. So we're console.logging it right here, and then we're putting this block right here to represent that. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into this gray for loop again because we have console.log and we're running the code in between these orange brackets because we're still there. So now we're running this for loop again. So now we're initializing this again, and it will start at 0 again. It restarts it. So z, step 1, z less than or equal to 2. Yeah, we're just running through the code again. Since it's restarted, we're at 0, so it is less than or equal to 2. Increment it by 1, or I'm sorry, we also console.log it right here for step 1. Now we're going to increment it. Step 2, z is now 1. Step 1 again, z is less than or equal to 2. Yep, console.log it, it's down there, we're good to go. Step 2, increment it, z less than or equal to 2. Yes, it is, so we're console.logging again for step 1. Also log it, increment it right here. We're going to go here. Is z less than or equal to 2? 3 and 2, yeah. It's not. So we're exiting out of that. We're not doing that anymore, right? We're jumping back up here. Now, this, I'm sorry, can I go back a slide? So now that we've exited out right here, step 2 triggers up here, I++, because we've run all this code, right? Now we're incrementing this for loop. I is now 2. Step 1 is I less than or equal to 2. Or I'm sorry, is I less than or equal to 1? Done, because it's not. We have I is equal to 2. So as you can see here, we have the orange for loop ran twice, where 0 and 1, I'm sorry. And this ran 3, 4, 5, 6 times in this for loop. So you guys might get a little bit of a better understanding when we do the coding, but this is a really good example to kind of visualize what's going on. So let's go ahead and jump into the code editor and check out how this works in a browser using a real-time example. All right. Let's go ahead and check out a for loop, or not a for loop, a nested for loop. So let's do I is equal to 0, the initialization. I is less than, well, let's do 4. Less than or equal to 4, why not? That is the condition. And then we're going to do I++. You guys remember from earlier, you guys know what these are. So we're going to have that there. Then we're going to do another for loop. And I'm going to purposely make a mistake right here, see if you guys catch it before I finish typing this out. Let's do this. Let's do I equals 0. I is less than or equal to, let's do 2, 3, why not? And then I++, same thing as the other one. It's just another for loop inside of another one. We have the initialization. Let's get this a little cleaner. We have the initialization, the condition, checking the condition, and then we have the incrementer, same thing. So did you guys see what's wrong right here? I'll give you another second. I'm going to do console.log I right here, and then I will do console.log I right here. So this won't work right here. I'm very curious if you guys see what's going on in this nested for loop right here. The issue is, I'm sorry, let me put these brackets right here. That's not the reason why. Sorry, guys. So here we go. So now we have this nested for loop in here, right? So what's going on in the inner for loop? Do you guys see what's going on? So it's actually that I is the same as here, right? So if we were to run this, it would be referencing the same I as the outer for loop. And it basically wouldn't work. It would just run the same amount of times that this does. So if we do this right here, go ahead and give that a save and just refresh this, it's just going to do 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. I mean, that's not what we're doing. We have the same I, so it's just counting the same amount of times as the outer for loop, or incrementing. So let's go ahead and change this. This is going to be z. So we have a completely different variable inside of the inner for loop. This is going to allow us to actually use the for loop for what we want it to do. And it'll make the nested for loop work properly. So we have I is equal to 0. Let's apply. Let me make this a bit clearer. I'm going to do I plus outer for loop. And then we'll just do something like plus for loop. All right, I like to put little spaces right there. So let's go ahead and refresh this and see what happens. So look, It's the same thing as the slides we just went through. So we look at here, outer for loop went once, right? Going, and then we went through the inner for loop. Look at that, same thing. Just imagine those boxes that we had in the last slides that we were looking at, and we have outer for loop runs again. Then we just run the inner for loop, outer, inner for loop. If you guys go ahead and type that in on your editor or your browser, you guys can check it out, and you can just see how it works. If you're having a little bit of difficulty with this, go ahead and rewatch the slides to make it'll help you understand it more. It'll make a bit more sense, because when you see those boxes, when you see those boxes pop up for each iteration or incrementation of the loop, it'll kind of make it a little bit easier for you guys to understand. So I have one more example that I wanted to show you guys. All right, so let's go ahead and check out this array example using a nested for loop. So we have an array here, or it's just called R, that contains 3 arrays. So this is going to be a nested array. Let me make this a little bit clearer for you guys here. So if you haven't worked with arrays before, it's very important to know that arrays are 0 based. So what that means is that the first index will be starting at 0 and not 1. Excuse me. So we're going to be starting at an index of 0. I'll point this out to you guys here. Index of 1. Index of 2. So just really quickly, I'll just go over this really quick so you guys understand exactly what's happening in this array. Just in case you don't really understand arrays, I'm going to go through this real fast. So right here, we have R with 3 arrays, right? 1, 2, and 3. So the first index of the array is going to be 0, the next one 1, the next one 2. So what you can see here is if we do something like console.log R, and then we want to access 0, what do you think we're going to be getting? So let's do this. So we're getting A and B, right? We're getting what's inside of the 0 index, which is another array that contains A and B. So what if we wanted to, what do we get if we do something like, what about this? 1 and 0. So let's check this out. We have an index of 1, array index of 1, so we're accessing this point right here, and then 0. So what would be 0 inside of this? It would be C. So you get the access to C right there. So let's check out how a nested for loop would be able to gain access to these variables in case you ever come across some type of nested data in the future or something. Could be handy to know. You don't necessarily have to use a nested for loop, but it's good to know in the future. So let's go ahead and check this out. So we have our for loop, our outer for loop, and our inner for loop. And we are simply just going to console.log each of the indexes inside of each array. So if we're trying to console.log A, B, C, D, E, and F. So let's start with the outer one. So we have I equals 0, I is less than array.length for right now, and then I++. So let's see if this would work. So we need to go through the array. It would have to be, we have to go 1, 2, 3. So let's do this. Less than or equal to 2. So it's going to be 0, right? 1, 2. It's a little confusing. You might want to put something like 3, but it's not 3 because it's going to be arrays starting at 0. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2. So that's actually going to be 3 times. So let's go ahead and check and see if this works. I'm simply going to log this. Console.log I. Right? 0, 1, 2. Oops. Let's do this. I. So right there, I console.log I without the brackets, signifying that I just want to console.log the variable I itself, the incrementer, or I'm sorry, not the incrementer, but the variable I in the for loop itself. So if you add the brackets around it, that means we're accessing the variable of R. So now we have A, B, C, D, E, F, right? So right now we got each individual one on the outer for loop, right? So we're gonna have to go through that each time because I is gonna be the outer for loop. So this is gonna be, I is gonna be 0, we'll get this. I is gonna be 1, we'll get this. I is gonna be 2, and we'll get this whole thing. So now let's work with the inner for loop. So now that we have that going, let's count how many times we're gonna have to iterate through inside of each of those nested arrays. So we'll have 1 and 2. So we're just gonna have to iterate through them 2 times. So in the inner one, once we gain access to this, we just have to go twice inside of it. So let's check this out. Z is less than or equal to 1. All right, I think that'll work. So let's go I and Z and see what happens, and then I'll explain what's going on. A, B, C, D, E, F. Got it. So if this is a little bit confusing, let's try to explain what's happening here. We have an array, or R array, yeah, R, and that contains 3 arrays inside of it. Now here, as you can see, we have array I, so I on the first iteration of the outside loop, the outer for loop, is going to be 0. So the first time this goes through, it's going to be 0. I is going to be 0 here. And then C is going to run 2 times. So I is going to be 0. So we have access to this. And then we have 2 times. We're running it 2 times in the inner for loop. And that's going to be 0 and 1. And that's what Z is going to be. So we're running, it's going to be essentially 0. And then Z will go 0, 1, and then it'll change, I will change to 2, or I'm sorry, 1, and then it'll be I, and then we'll just do it again, 0, 1, and then finally I would be 2, and then Z would be 0, 1 again, giving us access to each of those individual nested strings inside those nested arrays. And that's pretty much it for nested for loop and working with some nested arrays and how it would kind of work in real life. You don't really run into this a lot. And I don't personally like using nested for loops. The logic is just a little bit weird for me, and there's other ways of doing it. So don't think this is the only way, but it's good to know because it's part of the fundamentals of JavaScript. And you might see this out there in the world. So it's always good to know how these are actually working. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, let me know. If any suggestions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions, and I would be happy to make a video for you guys, no matter what it is. If it's related to JavaScript, HTML, or CSS, I'd be happy to make one for you if it's a topic that is confusing you. So please let me know. I'm making these videos for you guys. If you like my video, please subscribe, or else I will see you guys next time on my other videos. Have a good night.